I'd always suspected that David married me for my money. The signs were there from the beginning. His lingering glances at my bank statements, the way he'd subtly guide conversations toward my family investments, his excessive interest in my financial portfolio reviews. But love makes fools of us all, and I'd chosen to ignore the evidence hidden in plain sight. The anesthesiologist's voice was the last thing I remembered before darkness claimed me. Count backward from 10, Mrs. Sullivan. I made it to 7 before the world dissolved around me. 8 hours of delicate spinal surgery lay ahead, a procedure I'd delayed for months, terrified of the vulnerability, the loss of control. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'll be right here when you wake up, David had promised, squeezing my hand. His blue eyes, the ones that had captivated me at that charity gala 6 years ago, held what I'd mistaken for concern. Now I recognize it for what it was: calculation. While surgeons reconstructed my damaged spine, my husband of 6 years was systematically dismantling our life together, executing a plan he'd likely been orchestrating for months, if not years. I woke up alone. No David waiting by my bedside, no reassuring smile, no gentle hand holding mine. Just the sterile hospital room, beeping monitors, and a nurse checking my vitals. Your husband said he had to step out for a bit, the nurse explained, adjusting my IV drip. Something about paperwork for the insurance. Hours passed. Night fell. Pain medication clouded my thoughts, but couldn't numb the growing certainty that something was wrong. Very wrong. When my phone finally rang from the bedside table, I struggled to reach it, wincing as fresh surgical pain lanced through my body. Hello? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, rough and weak. Elena. Just my name, spoken in my sister Margot's voice. Not David's. How are you feeling? Where's David? I asked, ignoring her question. The pause told me everything before she even spoke. That's why I'm calling. Have you checked your accounts today? Of course I hadn't. I'd been unconscious on an operating table while surgeons fused vertebrae in my spine. But Margot's question sent a chill through me that not even hospital-grade painkillers could dull. What's happened? I struggled to sit up, gritting my teeth, against the pain. He's gone, Elena, and he's taken everything he could get his hands on. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Study, fog of anesthesia and pain medication couldn't blunt the impact of those words. Margot continued, her voice tight with controlled fury, explaining how David had drained our joint accounts, maxed out our credit cards, and even taken the emergency cash from our home safe. All while surgeons were working to repair my shattered spine. How did you find out? I asked, trying to process the betrayal through the haze of post-surgical medication. He called me, Margot said, her voice hardening. Actually had the audacity to call me from the airport. Said to tell you not to bother looking for him. Said it was just business and that you'd land on your feet eventually. You always do, apparently. The calculated timing was what hurt most. In those first moments of realization, he'd waited until I was at my most vulnerable, physically incapacitated and isolated. The surgery date had been set 3 months in advance. Plenty of time for him to plan his exit strategy. Which accounts? I asked, my mind already cataloging our financial entanglements. From what I could tell after you gave me your passwords, he's cleaned out your joint checking and savings. The investment account you shared is empty. The home equity line of credit has been maxed out. Credit cards, too. I closed my eyes, the room spinning slightly as the implications set in. But beneath the shock and betrayal, something else stirred. A cold clarity that felt almost foreign in my pain-addled state. Margot, I said slowly, I need you to come to the hospital. Bring your laptop. I'm already on my way, she replied. But Elena, shouldn't you be resting? The doctor said. David doesn't know everything about our finances, I interrupted, a strange calm settling over me. There are accounts he doesn't know about, investments he's never been aware of. The silence on the other end was weighted. With surprise. You kept secrets from David? Margot finally asked, the faintest hint of approval coloring her tone. Let's just say I never completely ignored Dad's advice about marriage and money. Our father, a self-made investment banker with a healthy dose of paranoia, had drilled financial independence into his daughters from an early age. Always keep something for yourself, he'd warned us. Something no one else knows about. It seemed melodramatic at the time. Now it felt prophetic. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Margot promised. After hanging up, I lay back against the hospital pillows, mind racing despite the medication. David had been meticulous in his extraction, timing it perfectly with my surgery. 8 hours of unconsciousness had given him ample time to execute his plan, to disappear with our liquid assets while I lay vulnerable on an operating table. But he'd missed something critical. He didn't know about the shares, the private investment. Our father had helped me set up 3 years before he died. A significant position in a promising biotech startup that had recently gone public with little fanfare. The shares were held in a private account under my maiden name, managed through our family's longtime financial advisor. David had never known they existed. I'd almost forgotten about them myself, viewing them as a long-term investment, something to potentially fund our future children's education. Now they represented my financial lifeline, and the means to ensure David wouldn't enjoy his ill-gotten gains for long. Margot arrived as promised, striding into my hospital room with her laptop, bag slung over one shoulder and a thunderous expression on her face. That spineless, calculating bastard, she hissed, setting up her computer on the rolling hospital table. The nerve of him, Elena. The absolute nerve. My younger sister had never trusted David, had seen something in him that I'd been too besotted to recognize. Another thing I should have paid attention to. He thinks I'm helpless, I said, struggling again to sit up straighter. Incapacitated by surgery and betrayal. He thinks I'll be too weak to come after him. Margot helped adjust my pillows, her expression softening momentarily with concern for my physical state before hardening again with resolve. Then he doesn't know you very well, does he? She said, turning her laptop toward me. Where do we start? I guided her through accessing my private email account, the one David didn't know about, where I kept correspondence with Jonathan Harford, our family's financial advisor. Within minutes, we were looking at the current valuation of my biotech shares in Neuroval Therapeutics, a company pioneering breakthrough treatments for neurological disorders. Margot's eyes widened as the numbers loaded on screen. Elena, this is... I know, I said quietly. The initial investment had been substantial, a portion of my inheritance after our father's death. But in the 3 years since, Neuroval had exceeded all expectations. The shares had increased in value nearly tenfold following their recent FDA approval announcement. David has no idea about this? Margot asked, scrolling through the account details. None. I kept it separate, just like Dad always said to. It was going to be a surprise eventually, once they really took off. I laughed bitterly, wincing as the movement jarred my surgical site. I guess the surprise is on him now. Margot's fingers flew across the keyboard, noting account numbers, contact information, current valuations. This changes everything, she murmured. He thinks he's left you destitute, but this gives us options. The rush of relief was tempered by a spreading coldness inside me. David's betrayal hadn't just ended our marriage, it had transformed me. Each minute that passed, each new detail we uncovered of his meticulous planning, crystallized something within me. The woman who had been wheeled into surgery that morning, trusting, devoted, perhaps a bit naive, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone hardened and resolute. "We need to contact Jonathan," I said, my voice steadier now. "And I need a lawyer. Not the family attorney. Someone specialized in financial fraud and divorce. Someone with teeth." Margot was already typing notes. "I know exactly who to call. Remember Sophia Chen from law school? She specializes in high-net-worth divorces and financial crimes now. Absolute shark in the courtroom." I nodded, already formulating the beginning of a plan. "Perfect, but we need to move carefully. David doesn't know about these shares, and I want to keep it that way as long as possible. Let him think he's won." "You're not going to alert the police immediately?" Margot asked, looking up from her notes. I shook my head, decision crystallizing. "Not yet. First, I need to understand exactly what he's done, where he's gone, and what his plan is. If we move too quickly, he might disappear completely." The pieces were beginning to align in my mind, a counter-strategy taking shape with surprising clarity despite my physical pain and the fog of medication. "I need you to do something else for me," I told Margot. "Go to our house. See what else he's taken, what he's left behind. Look for any clues about where he might have gone. Travel documents, receipts, anything he might have overlooked. You think he made mistakes?" "Everyone makes mistakes," I said, a cold certainty settling over me. "Especially people who think they're smarter than everyone else. David always had a blind spot, his ego. He thinks he's thought of everything, which means he's probably missed something critical." Margot nodded, already packing up her laptop. "I'll head there now. What about you? You just had major surgery. You need to rest." I glanced at the morphine drip beside my bed, then reached for the call button. "I need to start thinking clearly. That means less pain medication." "Elena, you can't." "I can, and I will." I cut her off, resolve hardening. "I need my faculties intact. Pain I can handle. Being foggy-headed while David disappears with our money, I cannot." The nurse appeared moments later, concerned when I requested a reduction in pain medication. After some negotiation and a consultation with my doctor, we compromised on a lower dosage that would keep the worst pain at bay without clouding my thinking. As Margot prepared to leave for our house, the house David and I had purchased together, 3 years ago, the house he'd apparently remortgaged without my knowledge, she paused at the door. "He's going to regret this," she said, her expression fierce with protective anger. "By the time you're done with him, he's going to wish he'd never heard the name Sullivan." After she left, I lay back against the hospital pillows, allowing myself one moment of pure, unfiltered grief. 6 years of marriage, dissolved in a single day of calculated betrayal. All the memories, the shared dreams, the future we'd planned, all of it revealed as fiction, a long con orchestrated by a man I thought had loved me. The tears came then, hot and silent, sliding down my temples and into my hair. I permitted myself exactly 5 minutes of this weakness, counting the seconds on the wall clock, before wiping my face with a clinical efficiency that would have made my father proud. David had made a critical miscalculation. He'd seen my physical vulnerability as total vulnerability. He'd equated my temporarily broken body with a broken spirit. He'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly understood, who I really was beneath the loving wife persona. Before I was David Sullivan's wife, I was Elena Sullivan, daughter of Richard Sullivan, who'd built Sullivan Financial Advisors from nothing and raised his daughters to be just as relentless in pursuit of their goals. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Margot. "At the house. Master bedroom ransacked. Home office too. Safe. Empty. Looks like he packed in a hurry, though. Found something interesting in the shredder bin." I texted back immediately. "What is it?" 3 dots appeared as Margot typed her response. "Receipt fragments. Managed to piece some together. Looks like hotel reservation. Grand Cayman. A grim smile stretched across my lips. Offshore banking. Predictable. David had always lacked imagination, despite his pretensions to financial brilliance. The Cayman Islands were such a cliché for hidden money. Keep looking, I texted back. And contact Jonathan Harford. Tell him it's urgent. The next text from Margot came seconds later. Already did. He's coming to the hospital tomorrow morning. Said to tell you not to worry. Not worry. As if that was possible now. But worry wasn't what I was feeling as the lower dose of pain medication clarified my thoughts. What rose in me was something altogether different. Something cold and focused and patient. David thought he'd executed the perfect plan. He'd waited until I was at my most vulnerable, quite literally unconscious and broken, to betray me in the most profound way possible. He'd taken our shared resources, maxed out our credit, leveraged our home, and disappeared. Presumably to some tropical tax haven where he planned to enjoy the fruits of his deception. What he didn't realize was that he'd left behind the most dangerous thing of all, a woman with nothing left to lose, significant resources he knew nothing about, and the intelligence to use them strategically. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to think, to plan. By the time Jonathan Harford arrived tomorrow morning, I needed to have the outline of a strategy in place. David had spent months planning his betrayal. I would need to be equally meticulous in my response. The hospital room's silence was broken only by the steady beep of monitoring equipment and the occasional footsteps of nurses in the hallway. Outside, darkness had fully descended, the city lights twinkling beyond my window. Somewhere out there, David was probably on a plane, congratulating himself on his clean getaway, imagining me broken and destitute upon waking from surgery. The thought no longer brought tears, only a steely determination. Let him enjoy his false victory, his imagined triumph. Let him bask in his cleverness and self-satisfaction. It would make the reckoning all the more satisfying when it came. Because it would come. Not immediately. I would need time to heal, to gather information, to reconstruct what he'd done and where he'd gone. But it would come as inevitably as sunrise. I reached for my phone again, opening the contacts list. Beyond Margot and Jonathan Harford, there were others I would need. People with specific skills and knowledge. People who could help me not just recover what was mine, but ensure David understood the magnitude of his mistake. The first call I made was to Dr. Sarah Patel, my closest friend from college, and now a renowned neurosurgeon. Not the one who had performed my surgery, but someone whose expertise I trusted implicitly. Elena, she answered, surprised to hear from me so soon after major surgery. Aren't you supposed to be resting? Change of plans, I replied, my voice steady despite the dull throbbing that permeated my spine. I need your professional opinion on something. How quickly can I recover from this surgery if I'm extremely motivated and have the best possible care? Her hesitation spoke volumes. Elena, spinal fusion isn't something you rush. The standard recovery timeline is— I understand the standard timeline, I interrupted. I'm asking what's possible with unlimited resources and absolute commitment to rehabilitation. Another pause, longer this time. When Sarah spoke again, her voice had shifted from friend to clinical specialist. Best case scenario, with aggressive physical therapy, optimal conditions, and assuming no complications? You could be mobile with assistance in 3 to 4 weeks. Relatively independent movement in 2 months. Full recovery still takes 6 to 12 months, Elena. That's just the reality of spinal surgery. I processed this information, adjusting mental timelines accordingly. Thank you. That's what I needed to know. I'll explain everything later, but right now, I need you to recommend the best physical therapist you know. Someone who can start working with me immediately, someone who pushes boundaries. Elena, what's going on? Sarah's concern was evident. Is everything okay with David? Shouldn't he be helping with this? The question sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. David is no longer in the picture, I said, the understatement of the century. I'll explain everything when I see you. For now, I just need that recommendation. After finishing the call with a promise from Sarah to send contact information for a top physical therapist by morning, I made 2 more calls, one to my personal assistant, Maya, who had been handling my administrative affairs during my medical leave, and another to a former colleague from my consulting days who now specialized in digital forensics. By the time I finished, exhaustion was setting in, my body demanding the rest that surgery and trauma required, even as my mind continued to race with plans and contingencies. I allowed myself to recline the hospital bed slightly, careful of my surgical site. Recovery would be my first priority, not just because I needed physical strength for what lay ahead, but because appearing focused solely on recovery would give me the cover I needed to work without David suspecting I was moving against him. Let him think I was lying helpless in a hospital bed, devastated by betrayal and immobilized by surgery. Let him imagine me crying, broken, defeated. Let him believe his plan had worked perfectly. The best revenge would be executed from the shadows, where he least expected it, when he least expected it. Just before sleep claimed me, my phone buzzed one final time. A text from Jonathan Harford. Just spoke with Margot. We'll be there at 9 a.m. sharp. Don't worry about the Neuroval shares. They're secure and David has no access. Try to rest, Elena. Tomorrow we start planning. A small smile curved my lips as I drifted off. Pain medication, finally pulling me under. The last thought that floated through my consciousness was simple but profound. David had made the worst mistake of his life. He'd underestimated me. Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent lights and a nurse checking my vitals. The pain was sharper. Today, more focused, as if my body was mapping the trauma with greater precision. I welcomed the clarity it brought, refusing the offer of increased pain medication. You sure, honey? The nurse asked, concerned. The doctor left orders that you can have more if you need it. I'm sure, I replied, carefully shifting to a more upright position. I need to be clear-headed today. She shook her head slightly, but made a note in my chart. Physical therapist will be by this afternoon for your first evaluation. Try not to push too hard too fast. After she left, I reached for my phone, finding several messages waiting. Margot had continued her search of the house late into the night, uncovering more fragments of David's hasty departure. A printed boarding pass torn in half showing a flight to Miami, likely a connecting flight to Grand Cayman. A burner phone, packaging discarded in the garage trash, and most interestingly, a business card for an attorney specializing in offshore asset protection. Amateur, I muttered to myself, scrolling through Margot's detailed findings. David had always been meticulous about digital security, passwords changed regularly, encrypted files, secure browsing, but he'd grown careless with physical evidence, in his rush to disappear before I woke from surgery. Jonathan Harford arrived precisely at 9 a.m., his imposing 6'4" frame filling the hospital room doorway, silver hair immaculately styled as always. The family's financial advisor for over 3 decades, Jonathan had managed our father's portfolio through multiple market crashes and had helped grow the Sullivan family wealth consistently despite economic turbulence. Elena, he greeted me, setting his briefcase on the visitor's chair and approaching my bedside. His expression was a mixture of concern and contained fury. When Margot called, I could hardly believe it. How are you holding up? I've been better, I admitted, gesturing to the chair. Thank you for coming so quickly. Jonathan settled his large frame into the chair, opening his briefcase. I brought the documents regarding your private holdings. Everything is secure. David has no way to access the Neuroval shares or the associated accounts. Relief washed through me, though I'd been reasonably confident that these assets were protected. What's the current valuation? Jonathan handed me a folder with the latest financial reports. As of market close yesterday, your position is worth... Approximately $4.2 million. The figure hung in the air between us. When I'd made the initial investment of $400,000 from my inheritance, the company had been years away from bringing their neural pathway treatment to market. Their recent FDA approval had changed everything. And it's liquid? I asked, scanning the documents. If I needed to access these funds quickly? Jonathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. The shares are publicly traded now, so yes, they could be liquidated. Though given the company's trajectory, I wouldn't recommend selling everything at once. But, he added, clearly sensing my thoughts, if you needed substantial liquidity immediately, we could certainly arrange that without depleting the entire position. I closed the folder, mind racing with calculations. Let's establish exactly what David has taken first. I need to know what we're dealing with before making any decisions about the Neuroval shares. For the next hour, Jonathan and I meticulously reconstructed my financial picture, account by account. The damage was extensive. David had drained our joint checking and savings accounts, $347,000, maxed out our shared credit cards, $120,000 combined limit, taken a cash advance against our home equity line of credit, $250,000, and even managed to withdraw funds from my personal IRA by forging my signature, $215,000, a clear case of fraud that would help build the legal case against him. In total, he'd absconded with nearly $1 million in liquid assets. The IRA withdrawal will be the easiest to address legally, Jonathan noted, adding the figures to a spreadsheet on his tablet. That's straightforward fraud. The joint accounts will be more complicated, as he had legal access. I nodded, processing the information. And the house? The mortgage situation is concerning, Jonathan admitted. By drawing down the full home equity line, he's placed the property underwater. You were both on the loan documents, so you're both liable. Another calculated move on David's part. Our home in Westchester, a restored colonial we'd purchased, for $1.8 million, had been a source of pride. Now it represented another financial entanglement I'd need to address. What would you recommend? I asked, trusting Jonathan's financial acumen implicitly. He considered for a moment. Given your current situation and the Neuroval asset, I'd suggest not trying to save the house. Let the bank take it in foreclosure while we focus legal resources on pursuing David for the fraud elements. The Neuroval shares give you the freedom to start fresh without being tied to a property that's now financially toxic. The recommendation made sense, though the thought of losing our home, my home, stung. But sentiment had no place in this new reality. Each decision now needed to be strategic, designed to maximize my position and minimize David's advantages. Agreed, I said finally. The house is just a building. Better to let it go than waste resources trying to save it. Jonathan looked momentarily surprised by my detachment, then nodded with approval. Your father would be proud of your clear thinking. Elena, now about your immediate needs while you recover. We were discussing the logistics of setting up a new financial infrastructure, accounts David couldn't access, secure communication channels, revised estate planning, when Margot arrived, bringing with her a leather portfolio I recognized from our home office. Found this hidden behind the bookshelf, she announced without preamble. Looks like David's escape notebook. Every page is filled with notes about offshore banking, second citizenship programs, and how to disappear without a trace, Jonathan raised an eyebrow as Margot spread the contents across the foot of my hospital bed. Pages of meticulous research, printed articles, handwritten notes, a comprehensive guide to vanishing with stolen assets. He's been planning this for at least a year, I said quietly, examining a page of notes dated 14 months earlier. Look at this. Notes from a consultation with someone named Mason about asset protection strategies from March last year. Margot's expression darkened. March? Wasn't that when I first started having back problems, I confirmed, the betrayal cutting deeper. When the doctors first suggested surgery might eventually be necessary. The implication hung heavy in the room. David hadn't just taken advantage of my surgery. He'd begun planning his exit strategy the moment he realized I would eventually be physically vulnerable. "I want everything," I said suddenly, looking up from the damning evidence. "Not just what he took, everything. I want him penniless, passportless, and preferably in prison." Jonathan and Margot exchanged glances, surprise evident in their expressions. I'd always been the measured Sullivan sister, the peacemaker, the one who sought compromise and resolution. But that woman had been left behind in the operating room. "It won't be easy," Jonathan cautioned. "Offshore accounts are designed to be difficult to penetrate. And if he's looking at citizenship elsewhere—" "I don't care how difficult it is," I interrupted, a calm certainty settling over me. "David thinks he's won. He thinks he's outsmarted me. I'm going to show him just how wrong he is." I looked between my sister and our trusted advisor, seeing their concern, and beneath it, a growing respect for my resolve. "First, we consolidate what remains and establish my financial independence," I continued, the strategy crystallizing in my mind. "Jonathan, I want a comprehensive plan for the Neuroval shares. Enough liquidity for immediate needs but positioned for long-term growth." He nodded, already making notes. "Margot, I need you to contact Sophia Chen. Tell her I need Grand Cayman expertise, someone who knows how to navigate their banking system and legal framework." "On it," Margot replied, pulling out her phone. "And both of you," I added, "I need absolute discretion. As far as the world is concerned, as far as David is concerned, I'm focused solely on my physical recovery. Nothing else." The pain in my surgically repaired spine was intensifying, a sharp reminder of my physical limitations. But somehow, it centered me, focused my thoughts with crystalline clarity. David had taught me an invaluable lesson about trust and vulnerability. Now it was my turn to teach him something about consequences. Let him enjoy his stolen fortune in the Cayman sunshine. Winter was coming. The physical therapist arrived at exactly 2 p.m., a compact woman with close-cropped silver hair and the lean physique of a marathon runner. Dr. Patel's recommendation had come through as promised. "Vivian Reeves," she introduced herself, scanning my chart with clinical efficiency. "Dr. Patel speaks highly of you, says you're highly motivated." "That's one way of putting it," I replied, attempting to shift to a more upright position and wincing at the resulting pain. Vivian noticed immediately. "First rule, don't push through sharp pain. Dull ache is expected. Sharp pain means damage." She spent the next hour assessing my post-surgical mobility, strength, and pain thresholds. Her hands were gentle but probing, her questions precise. By the end, she had compiled a detailed baseline of my condition. "Under normal circumstances, I'd recommend a conservative approach given the extensive nature of your fusion," she said, making final notes in my chart. But Dr. Patel mentioned special circumstances. Our eyes met, a silent understanding passing between us. Vivian wasn't just any physical therapist. She specialized in rapid rehabilitation for high-performance clients, professional athletes, military personnel, people who couldn't afford standard recovery timelines. "How quickly can I be functional?" I asked directly. "Define functional. Able to travel, conduct business, move without obvious impairment." Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly, but she considered the question with professional detachment. "Within aggressive protocol and perfect compliance. 4 weeks until you could travel with assistance. 6 until you could potentially travel alone. Conducting business depends on your field. If you mean sitting in meetings, 4 weeks. If you mean hiking through rough terrain," she shook her head, "months, at minimum. Not as fast as I'd hoped, but faster than standard protocols would allow." I nodded, decision made. "I want the most aggressive recovery plan you can design. Cost is no object." "It won't just be expensive," Vivian warned. "It will be painful, exhausting. There will be days you'll hate me, hate yourself, hate everything. Perfect, I replied with grim satisfaction. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. She stood gathering her notes. Get as much rest as you can tonight. You'll need it. After Vivian left, I turned my attention back to the financial battleground. David's escape notebook had provided valuable intelligence, but we needed more. Specifically, we needed to track his movements from the moment he left our house. Margot arrived late afternoon with takeout food, hospital food being universally inedible, and news about Sophia Chen. She's taking your case, Margot announced, setting up the contraband dinner on my adjustable bed tray. Says it's exactly the kind of challenge she's been looking for. She's already putting together a team with Cayman expertise. I picked at the Thai food, my appetite still suppressed by medication and stress. What about the digital forensics? Your friend Marcus is on it. He's retrieving David's laptop from your home office tonight, the one David thought he'd wiped. Clean before leaving. Margot's smile held a predatory edge. Apparently, David's secure deletion methods were inadequate. A small victory, but I'd take it. David had always considered himself technologically savvy, but his knowledge was surface level, enough to impress at cocktail parties but not enough to truly cover his tracks against a professional. We'll need access to his email, cloud accounts, anything that might give us insight into his plans, I said, pushing the food aside. And we need to move quickly before he realizes we're tracking him. Margot nodded, pulling out her tablet. Marcus says he should have preliminary results by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, Sophia sent this. She handed me a preliminary legal strategy document outlining potential approaches for recovering assets moved offshore. The options ranged from standard civil litigation to more aggressive measures involving international law enforcement. She's assuming we can prove fraud rather than just divorce-related asset hiding, I noted, scanning the document. That changes the playing field significantly. The IRA withdrawal with the forged signature gives us that leverage, Margot confirmed. Plus, Sophia thinks the timing, during your surgery, constitutes a special kind of fiduciary breach that courts will view particularly harshly. I continued reading, pausing at a section about potential criminal charges. Wire fraud, identity, theft, financial elder abuse, given that some of the funds had technically been inherited from our father. The potential consequences for David were severe, not just financial restitution, but possible prison time. The thought should have disturbed me. 6 days ago, I would have been horrified at the prospect of sending my husband to prison. Now, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. We'll need proof he's actually in Grand Cayman, I said, setting the document aside. Confirmation of where he's staying, which banks he's visiting. Margot smiled enigmatically. Already in progress. Remember Liam Reynolds from college? The one who was always trying to ask you out. I frowned, vaguely recalling a persistent classmate with earnest eyes and an excessive fondness for bow ties. Vaguely. Didn't he go into finance? Private investigation, actually. Based in, wait for it, Grand Cayman. My eyebrows shot up. You're joking. Not even a little bit. I reached out this morning. He's thrilled to help. Says he knows every bank, hotel, and restaurant on the island. If David's there, Liam will find him. The universe, it seemed, occasionally delivered justice in unexpected packages. Tell him we need photographic evidence, banking details if possible, and any information about who David might be meeting with, I instructed, already envisioning the case we were building. And Margot? Make sure he understands the need for discretion. David can't know he's being watched. The evening brought a visit from my neurosurgeon, Dr. Watkins, who was surprised by my rapid improvement in mental clarity and concerned about my decision to reduce pain medication. Recovery isn't a race, Mrs. Sullivan, he cautioned, reviewing my chart with a furrowed brow. And pain management is an essential component of healing. I understand, doctor. But I have important decisions to make, and I need my mind clear. He looked unconvinced, but ultimately respected my choice, warning that he would intervene if my vital signs indicated dangerous levels of physiological stress from unmanaged pain. After he left, I received an unexpected visitor, Detective Alicia. Kang from the Financial Crimes Unit of the NYPD, Margot had apparently been busy. "Ms. Sullivan," she greeted me, showing her badge before taking the visitor's chair. "Your sister told me you might want to file a report about some potentially fraudulent financial activity." I studied Detective Kang carefully. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal pantsuit, with the focused intensity of someone who had seen every financial scam imaginable and taken personal offense at each one. "My husband emptied our accounts while I was in surgery," I began, watching her reaction, "including withdrawing funds from my IRA with a forged signature." Detective Kang's expression remained neutral, but she immediately pulled out a notepad. "Walk me through exactly what happened, starting with when you became aware of the situation." For the next hour, I provided a detailed account of David's actions, careful to stick to verifiable facts rather than speculation. I explained the timing, the amounts taken, the evidence Margot had discovered at our home, and the preliminary findings about his flight to Miami with a likely connection to Grand Cayman. Detective Kang took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she reviewed her notes before speaking. "The forged signature on the IRA withdrawal is our strongest criminal angle," she confirmed, echoing Sophia's assessment. "That's clear-cut fraud. The joint accounts are trickier from a criminal perspective, though they'll certainly factor into civil proceedings." "What about the fact that he did this while I was physically incapacitated?" I asked. "Doesn't that constitute some form of exploitation?" Detective Kang's eyes narrowed slightly, considering. "Potentially, the timing shows premeditation and could be argued as exploitation of a vulnerable person. The fact that he specifically waited until you were unconscious from surgery strengthens that argument." She closed her notebook, expression becoming more human, less official. "I'll be candid with you, Ms. Sullivan. Cases involving married couples and shared finances can be challenging to prosecute criminally. Courts often prefer to handle these matters in family court during divorce proceedings." I'd expected this. But the forged signature changes things significantly. That crosses the line from civil dispute to criminal fraud, especially given the amount. $215,000 is grand larceny territory. "What do you need from me to pursue this?" "Documentation of the withdrawal, proof the signature is forged, and evidence linking your husband to the transaction." She handed me her card. "I'll open a preliminary investigation based on your statement today, but those documents will be crucial for moving forward." I nodded, already planning to have Jonathan compile the necessary evidence. "You'll have everything by tomorrow afternoon." After Detective Kang left, exhaustion finally caught up with me. The day had been productive but taxing, each conversation and decision draining my limited physical reserves. Despite my determination to stay clear-headed, I found myself accepting the night nurse's offer of sleep medication. "Just enough to rest," I stipulated. "I need to be alert by 6 a.m. for physical therapy." The nurse nodded sympathetically, adjusting my IV. "Don't worry, this won't leave you groggy in the morning." As I drifted toward sleep, my thoughts circled around David. Where was he at this exact moment? Sipping cocktails at a beachfront resort? Meeting with offshore bankers to secure his stolen funds? Did he feel any remorse? Any twinge of conscience about abandoning his wife of 6 years as she lay vulnerable in a hospital bed? The questions followed me into uneasy dreams where I chased David through endless hospital corridors, my body inexplicably healed and strong, while he remained just out of reach, laughing over his shoulder. I woke at 5:30 a.m. to the gentle chime of my phone alarm, disoriented but determined. True to the nurse's promise, the sleep medication had left my system cleanly, leaving me tired but mentally sharp. Vivian arrived precisely at 6 a.m., as promised, bringing with her an arsenal of specialized equipment. Day 1, she announced without preamble. Basic mobility assessment and initial stretching protocol. What followed was the most productive torture I'd ever experienced. Vivian's methods were precise, scientific, and brutally effective. Each movement was calibrated to work within my post-surgical limitations while simultaneously pushing their boundaries. Breathe through it, she instructed as she guided my leg through a gentle but excruciating stretch. Pain is information, not an enemy. Listen to what it's telling you. By 7:30 a.m., I was drenched in sweat and trembling with exertion, but had accomplished more movement than Dr. Watkins had projected for my first week of recovery. Vivian seemed cautiously pleased. Your determination is an asset, she noted, recording my progress in her tablet. But don't mistake willpower for physical healing. The body has its own timeline. I don't have the luxury of following a conventional timeline, I replied, carefully shifting to reach for water. Vivian's expression softened slightly. Your sister mentioned your situation. I won't pretend to understand everything you're going through, but I do understand the need to regain control when life has taken it from you. She packed up her equipment, pausing at the door. We'll go as fast as safely possible. Just remember, the strongest revenge is living well. Living well. An appealing thought, but insufficient given the circumstances. David hadn't just taken money. He'd stolen my trust, my security, my belief in my own judgment. Those losses demanded more than living well as compensation. They demanded justice. And justice, in this case, would be expensive, painful, and comprehensive. The morning brought a flurry of updates. Jonathan arrived with documentation of the fraudulent IRA withdrawal, complete with handwriting analysis confirming the forged signature. Margot forwarded preliminary information from Liam in Grand Cayman. David had indeed been spotted checking into the Ritz-Carlton on 7 Mile Beach, traveling under his own name with apparent confidence that his scheme had succeeded. Most promising was the message from Marcus about David's laptop. The secure deletion had been laughably inadequate, leaving recoverable traces of emails, financial records, and, most damning, a detailed timeline for his escape. He literally created a spreadsheet titled Exit Strategy, Margot reported, showing me screenshots Marcus had sent, complete with a countdown to your surgery date and step-by-step instructions for himself. The document was simultaneously infuriating and invaluable. A roadmap of David's betrayal that would prove devastating in court. It detailed not just the financial extractions but his methodology for covering his tracks, the false stories he'd planned to tell mutual friends about our amicable separation, and even notes about which of our acquaintances he thought would side with him versus me. He's categorized our entire social circle, I observed, scrolling through the document with growing disbelief. Look, he has them ranked by loyalty risk, with contingency plans for each person. Margot's expression darkened as she read over my shoulder. He has me listed as hostile asset, immediate containment required. What does that even mean? It means he planned to neutralize you as a threat, I translated, understanding David's strategic thinking all too well. Probably by preemptively discrediting you to our friends, painting you as the overprotective sister trying to interfere in our marriage. The cold calculation was breathtaking. This wasn't a husband making a rash decision to leave. This was a predator who had methodically planned his attack, assessing threats, creating contingencies, timing his strike for maximum effectiveness. Among the recovered files was a folder labeled Elena Weaknesses, a psychological profile David had compiled to anticipate and counter my potential responses. Reading it was like discovering a stranger had been living in my home, studying me through one-way glass for years. Conflict-averse to a fault, he'd written. Will sacrifice her own interests to maintain harmony. Can be manipulated through appeals to fairness and guilt. Primary vulnerability, excessive trust in those she considers her people. Each observation was technically accurate yet fundamentally wrong, missing the essential core of who I was beneath the accommodating wife persona I'd adopted. David had studied the role I played but never understood the woman beneath it. His most critical miscalculation was listed under financial acumen. Delegates financial matters whenever possible. Limited interest in investment details. Unlikely. To challenge financial narratives without outside counsel. I laughed aloud, wincing as the movement jarred my surgical sight. He really had no idea, did he? Margot shook her head, equal parts angry and bemused. He saw what he wanted to see. A compliant wife who trusted him implicitly with finances. Not the daughter of Richard Sullivan who probably absorbed more about strategic investment over family dinners than David learned in his entire MBA program. We continued analyzing the recovered files, building a comprehensive picture of David's plan and his current vulnerabilities. By midday, we had enough material to significantly strengthen both the criminal complaint with Detective Kang and the civil strategy Sophia was developing. Sophia wants to know if you're ready to move on the offshore accounts, Margot said, checking. A new message on her phone. She has connections at the Cayman Financial Authority who might be willing to freeze accounts pending investigation, but we'd need to move quickly before David can transfer funds elsewhere. I considered the timing carefully. Moving too quickly risked alerting David that we were onto him, potentially causing him to accelerate his plans or disappear completely. Moving too slowly gave him time to further secure his position. Tell her to prepare everything but wait for my signal, I decided. I want confirmation from Liam about which specific banks David is visiting first. We need precision. Margot nodded, typing the response. She also wants to know if you're ready to formally file for divorce. The sooner we file, the sooner we can get emergency orders freezing domestic assets. Not yet, I replied, surprising myself with the answer. The divorce is inevitable, but timing it correctly is crucial. Right now, David thinks he's gotten away clean. The moment divorce papers are filed, he'll know I'm taking action. So what's the play? I smiled, the strategy crystallizing in my mind. We gather intelligence. We build our case. We identify every account, every move he's made. And then, when everything is in place, we strike all at once. Criminal charges, civil litigation, asset freezes, and divorce proceedings. A coordinated attack that leaves him nowhere to turn. Margot's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, then to something like awe. You're not just trying to recover what he took. You're setting up a complete takedown. He left me, for dead, Margot. Financially, emotionally, and very nearly physically. The memory of waking alone after surgery, vulnerable and in pain, sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. He deserves nothing less than complete consequences. The rest of the day was devoted to further intelligence gathering. Jonathan continued tracing financial movements, documenting exactly how David had extracted and moved our shared assets. Marcus delved deeper into the recovered digital evidence, uncovering communications with offshore banking specialists dating back more than a year. Most promising was an update from Liam in Grand Cayman, including photographs of David entering First Caribbean International Bank, looking tanned and relaxed in linen pants and a blue button-down shirt. The picture of a man without a care in the world. He's scheduled meetings at 3 different banks over the next 2 days, Liam reported via encrypted message. Based on my contacts, he's setting up a complex structure of accounts and trusts. Standard procedure for someone looking to hide assets long-term. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, forming a clear picture of David's plan. Distribute the stolen funds across multiple offshore institutions, establish legal structures to obscure ownership, then eventually emerge with a clean fortune he could enjoy without fear of recovery efforts. It was textbook financial evasion, exactly the kind of scenario my father had warned against when he insisted I maintain separate, private investments. Always assume the worst of people when it comes to money, Elena, he'd advised during one of our weekend financial lessons. Not because people are inherently dishonest, but because money has a way of revealing what was hidden all along. How right he had been. Money hadn't corrupted David, it had simply revealed his true nature. Late afternoon brought my second physical therapy session with Vivian, even more grueling than the first. But the pain had purpose now, each excruciating. Movement bringing me one step closer to the mobility I would need to personally oversee David's downfall. Remarkable progress for day one, Vivian noted as she helped me back into bed afterward. But remember, healing isn't linear. You'll have setbacks, days when everything hurts worse than before. I can handle pain, I assured her, adjusting my position carefully. What I can't handle is helplessness. Vivian studied me thoughtfully, seeming to reach some internal decision. I have a colleague, former military rehab specialist. He works with patients who need to recover function in compressed time frames, often for unusual circumstances. She hesitated. His methods are unconventional, effective, but intense. Is he better than you? For your specific needs? Possibly. He specializes in functional recovery for high-stress situations, getting people operational when they need to. Not when the textbooks say they should be. I didn't hesitate. I want to work with both of you. Vivian nodded, unsurprised. I'll make the arrangements. But Elena, she added, her professional demeanor slipping momentarily to reveal genuine concern. Whatever you're planning, remember that pushing your body too far too fast can result in permanent damage. I appreciate the concern, I replied sincerely. But some damages are already permanent. All I can do now is make sure they weren't suffered in vain. As evening approached, I reviewed the day's progress with grim satisfaction. In just 48 hours since waking from surgery to discover David's betrayal, we had assembled a formidable response team, gathered substantial evidence, initiated criminal proceedings, and begun tracking his movements internationally. Not bad for someone he'd dismissed as conflict-averse to a fault. The night nurse arrived with dinner and evening medication, finding me studying financial documents Jonathan had sent over. You should be resting, she admonished gently, setting up the meal tray. I'll rest when I've finished what I need to do, I replied, not looking up from the papers. And what's that? I finally glanced up, meeting her concerned gaze with a smile that held no warmth. Getting my life back. On my terms. The nurse seemed about to say something else, then thought better of it, simply adjusting my pillows before leaving. Something in my expression must have conveyed that platitudes about rest and recovery would fall on deaf ears. As darkness fell outside my hospital window, I found myself thinking again about David, picturing him in his luxury hotel room, perhaps celebrating his successful heist with expensive room service and champagne. Did he miss me at all? Feel any regret? Or was he simply relieved that his long con had finally reached its profitable conclusion? It didn't matter, I decided, setting aside the documents and allowing myself to recline slightly. His feelings, or lack thereof, were irrelevant to what would come next. Because while David was sipping champagne and setting up offshore accounts, secure in the belief that he'd left his wife destitute and defeated, he remained blissfully unaware of two critical facts. I knew exactly where he was and what he was doing, and I had $4.2 million in biotech shares he knew nothing about. By the 5th day in the hospital, a routine had established itself. Early morning physical therapy with Vivian, followed by strategy sessions with Jonathan and Margot, afternoon consultations with Sophia Chen via secure video calls, and evening sessions with Vivian's military colleague, Michael Donovan, a taciturn, former Navy medic who approached rehabilitation with the intensity of combat operations. You understand we're breaking every standard recovery protocol, Michael reminded me as he guided me through agonizing core stabilization exercises. Your surgeon would have a stroke if he saw what we're doing. Dr. Watkins doesn't need to know. I replied, gritting my teeth through another repetition. What's our timeline looking like? Michael assessed my movement with clinical detachment. At this pace, hospital discharge in 3 days instead of 7. Basic independent mobility in 2 weeks rather than 6. Still painful as hell, still limited, but functional enough for what I understand you need. What I needed was the ability to travel, specifically to Grand Cayman, where David remained blissfully unaware of the net slowly closing around him. According to Liam's daily reports, my husband had settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings at different financial institutions, afternoons by the pool, evenings at expensive restaurants, often in the company of a blonde woman Liam had identified as Cassandra Winters, a financial privacy consultant with questionable credentials. They're quite friendly, Liam had noted delicately in his latest report, attaching photos of David and Cassandra sharing an intimate dinner at a beachfront restaurant, his hand resting possessively on hers. Should I continue surveillance of both subjects? Absolutely, I'd replied, feeling oddly detached from the obvious implication. The romantic betrayal seemed almost insignificant compared to the calculated financial predation. If anything, it simplified matters emotionally. Complete severance rather than just financial disentanglement. Dr. Watkins arrived for his daily check-in as Michael was finishing our session, raising his eyebrows at my visible exhaustion and the specialized equipment scattered around the room. This seems intensive for day 5 post-op, he observed with professional concern. I'm highly motivated, I replied, allowing Michael to help me back into bed. Dr. Watkins reviewed my chart, frowning slightly. Your pain management records show you're consistently declining maximum medication. I need mental clarity. You also need rest and proper pain control for optimal healing. He sighed, recognizing the determination in my expression. Look, Mrs. Sullivan, I can't force you to follow standard protocols, but I strongly advise against pushing too hard too fast. Spinal fusion is serious business. I nodded with appropriate contrition, while Michael discreetly packed up the evidence of our unorthodox regimen. I understand, Doctor. I'm just eager to regain independence. After Dr. Watkins left, looking unconvinced but resigned, Michael resumed our planning. For travel, you'll need specialized support, he explained, showing me catalogs of medical devices. A customized back brace, proper seating arrangements, medication timing protocols. It won't be comfortable, but it can be done safely if we're meticulous. I studied the options, selecting the most discreet yet effective supports. Order everything. Use this card. I handed him a new credit card from an account Jonathan had established under my maiden name. And Michael, complete discretion. I know. His expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, my ex-wife cleaned me out during a deployment. Different circumstances, same feeling of violation. You're handling it better than I did. The unexpected personal disclosure from the usually reserved specialist caught me off guard. How did you handle it? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Let's just say it involved poor decisions, property damage, and ultimately a weekend in county lockup. Your methodical approach is significantly more effective. The afternoon brought a breakthrough from Marcus's digital forensics work. He'd recovered deleted communications revealing that David had consulted with a specific law firm specializing in asset protection, Blackwell & Reed, with offices in New York, London, and Georgetown, Grand Cayman. I've traced emails to a partner, named Jeffrey Reed, Marcus reported via secure video call. They discussed creating a specific type of asset protection trust under Cayman law that would make fund recovery nearly impossible once established. How close is he to completing this structure? I asked, recognizing the significance of the timing. Based on the communication timeline and Liam's surveillance, I'd estimate he's about halfway through the process. These structures typically take 2 to 3 weeks to fully establish, with multiple verification steps and cooling-off periods. This was critical intelligence. If David completed the trust setup, recovering the stolen funds would become exponentially more difficult, potentially impossible. We needed to act before the structure was finalized. Send everything to Sophia immediately, I instructed, and copy Detective Kang on the evidence of forged signatures and wire fraud. It's time to accelerate. Within hours, Sophia had arranged an emergency conference call with her team, Jonathan, Margot, Detective Kang, and a representative from the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI who had taken interest in the case due to the international elements. We have enough for multiple warrants, Detective Kang confirmed after reviewing Marcus's findings. The forged signature, the documented timeline showing premeditation, the interstate wire transfers, it's solid. What about the Cayman accounts? I asked, focusing on the most critical element. The FBI agent, Special Agent Torres, took this. I question. That's more complicated. We have mutual legal assistance treaties with the Caymans, but financial privacy laws there still provide significant protection. However, he added, the evidence of predicate crimes committed in the U.S. gives us leverage to request emergency freezes while investigation proceeds. Sophia's assessment was more direct. The criminal case strengthens our civil position enormously. With evidence of fraud rather than just marital asset division, we can pursue emergency injunctions in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. How quickly can we move? I asked. We can file for domestic freezes immediately, Sophia replied. The international elements will take coordination, but given the strength of the evidence, we could potentially see action within 72 hours. Do it, I authorized. Full spectrum response. The next several hours were a blur of document reviews, electronic signatures, and detailed planning. Domestic accounts David hadn't yet emptied were frozen by evening. Criminal complaints were formally filed with supporting evidence. Sophia's team began preparing civil actions in multiple jurisdictions. By nightfall, the first phase of our counterattack was underway. David wouldn't feel the effects immediately. The offshore actions would take time to process through international channels. But the machinery of justice was now in motion. As the team dispersed to execute their respective responsibilities, Margot remained behind, studying me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You should rest, she suggested, noting my exhaustion. The wheels are turning now. I shook my head. Not yet. I need to speak with Jonathan about liquidating some of the Neuroval shares. The legal battle ahead will be expensive. Elena. Margot hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I know you're focused on making David pay, and God knows he deserves it. But I'm worried about what this is costing you, not financially, but physically and emotionally. I'm fine. You're not. Fine. You're 5 days post-major surgery, pushing your body beyond medical advice, and entirely consumed with revenge. Justice, I corrected. Not revenge. Margot's expression remained skeptical. Is there a difference in this case? The question gave me pause. Was there a difference? Was I pursuing David out of a sense of justice or simply for the satisfaction of destroying him as he'd attempted to destroy me? Maybe not, I admitted finally. Maybe it's both. But either way, I can't stop now. Margot nodded, accepting my decision even if she didn't entirely agree with it. Just remember that you have a life to rebuild after this. Don't lose yourself in the pursuit. After she left, I found myself reflecting on her warning. Had I become consumed? Was I risking my recovery, my future well-being, in the quest to bring David down? Perhaps. But the alternative, allowing him to escape with no consequences after, such calculated betrayal, was unacceptable. Some prices were worth paying. The next morning brought unexpected news from Liam in Grand Cayman. David had suddenly changed his routine, checking out of the Ritz-Carlton and moving to a more secluded villa on the island's east side. Something spooked him, Liam reported via encrypted message. He's canceled his remaining bank appointments and appears to be accelerating his timeline. Cassandra Winters is making arrangements for him to meet with offshore banking representatives outside normal channels. I frowned, scanning the surveillance photos showing David looking noticeably tense as he left the hotel with luggage. Has he been tipped off about our actions? Unclear, Liam replied. But he's definitely behaving like someone who feels exposed. The move to the Eastern District puts him in a location with minimal surveillance and restricted access. This development threatened to derail our carefully constructed timeline. If David managed to complete his financial arrangements ahead of schedule or worse, disappear to another jurisdiction, our legal efforts could miss their target. We need to disrupt his plans immediately, I decided, reaching for my phone to call Sophia. The legal strategy required adjustment in light of David's sudden movements. Sophia agreed to file emergency motions that day rather than waiting for complete documentation, accepting the higher risk of procedural challenges in exchange for speed. If he's accelerating, so must we, she confirmed. I'll coordinate with the Cayman authorities directly. The fact that he's exhibiting consciousness of guilt behaviors strengthens our case for emergency action. By midday, the revised strategy was in motion. Detective Kang had secured criminal warrants for financial records and account freezes. The FBI had initiated international protocols for evidence preservation. Sophia's team had filed for emergency injunctions in both New York and Cayman courts. Now we waited, the most difficult part for someone accustomed to action and control. Michael arrived for our evening session, immediately noting my distraction and heightened tension. Bad day? He asked, setting up his equipment. Complications, I replied, explaining the situation with David's sudden change in behavior. Michael considered this as he helped me through the first series of exercises. In combat medicine, we have a saying, the enemy always gets a vote. No plan survives contact intact. The question is how quickly you can adapt. I'm adapting, I assured him, gritting my teeth through a particularly challenging movement. But I need to be there, in Grand Cayman, not stuck in this hospital bed. You're not ready for international travel, he stated flatly. Not medically advisable for at least another— I don't care what's medically advisable, I interrupted. I need to be on the ground. The legal team is moving as quickly as possible, but David is slippery. If he senses the net closing, he could disappear completely. Michael studied me with clinical assessment. What's your timeline? 3 days, 4 at most. He shook his head. Impossible without significant risk. I'm willing to accept the risk. Michael's expression shifted from professional disapproval to reluctant understanding. It would require medical support during travel, specialized equipment, pain management protocols that don't compromise cognitive function. And even then, you'd be operating at maybe 40% capacity. Make it happen, I instructed. Whatever it costs, whatever it requires. I need to be in Grand Cayman when he realizes he's caught. While Michael began researching medical travel arrangements, I received another update from Liam. David had been observed meeting with a man identified as Jeffrey Reed, the same Blackwell and Reed partner from the recovered emails, at the private villa. The meeting had lasted over 3 hours, with Reed departing looking visibly concerned. Something's definitely happening, Liam reported. Reed went directly to their Cayman office afterward and initiated what appeared to be emergency protocols. Staff staying late, couriers coming and going, unusual activity for their typically sedate operation. Had David somehow learned of our legal actions? Or was he simply being extra cautious, accelerating his plans as a standard precaution? Either way, the development confirmed my instinct that physical presence would be necessary to ensure he didn't slip through the closing net. The 7th day post-surgery brought the first real victory. Sophia called early morning, her voice charged with professional satisfaction. The New York judge granted our emergency petition, she announced without preamble. All domestic assets connected to David are frozen, including accounts we weren't previously aware of. His credit is locked, domestic property secured, and financial institutions are required to report any contact attempts. What about Cayman? Actions? I asked, immediately focusing on the critical offshore component. In process. Their financial authority has initiated a review based on the U.S. criminal complaints. Not a full freeze yet, but they've flagged the accounts, which means any large movements will trigger additional scrutiny. Progress, if not complete victory. David was now partially contained, able to access whatever cash he had on hand and, potentially the Cayman funds already transferred, but unable to move money freely or access new domestic resources. He'll know something's wrong as soon as he attempts any financial transaction, Sophia continued. If he hasn't been alerted already, he will be within hours. I nodded, though she couldn't see me through the phone. Good. Let him feel the pressure. What's our next move? Criminal proceedings continue building, Sophia explained. Detective Kang and the FBI are coordinating on potential arrest warrants, though extradition from the Caymans would require additional steps. On the civil side, we're preparing for a hearing in 3 days before the Cayman Financial Services Authority. 3 days. The timing aligned perfectly with Michael's reluctant assessment of my travel readiness. Despite his concerns and Dr. Watkins's explicit disapproval, arrangements were being made for medical transport to Grand Cayman, time to arrive before the crucial financial hearing. I'll be there, I informed Sophia. In person. Her surprise was evident even over the phone. Elena, that's not necessary. We have excellent local counsel who can— It's not about legal representation, I interrupted. It's about looking David in the eye when his world collapses. I need to be there. There was a brief silence before Sophia responded, her voice softening. Slightly. I understand. My team will arrange appropriate accommodations and support. The day brought confirmation that David had indeed felt the first effects of our counterattack. According to Liam's surveillance, he had spent hours on secure calls, becoming visibly agitated as the day progressed. By evening, he had instructed Cassandra to arrange for a private boat, possibly planning to leave the island if legal pressure intensified. He's panicking, Margot observed as we reviewed the latest surveillance photos showing David pacing the villa's deck, phone pressed to his ear. Good. Let him feel what you felt waking up alone after surgery, realizing everything had been taken. The parallel hadn't escaped me. There was a certain symmetry to David's situation now, feeling secure one moment, then watching his carefully constructed plans unravel the next. The difference was that his panic was justified. Mine had been manufactured by his betrayal. Dr. Watkins made his final assessment later that day, surprised and somewhat suspicious about my accelerated recovery. While not yet ready for discharge by standard protocols, my progress had been remarkable enough to justify conditional release, with appropriate home support. Though I strongly advise against any travel for at least 3 more weeks, he emphasized, signing the necessary paperwork. Your fusion needs time to stabilize. Significant movement or stress could compromise the surgical site. I made appropriate noises of agreement while making no promises, accepting the discharge instructions and prescriptions with the polite attention of someone who had already made contrary decisions. My final night in the hospital was spent reviewing comprehensive briefing materials Sophia had prepared for the Cayman proceedings. The legal arguments were complex, involving international banking regulations, fraud statutes, and marital property laws across multiple jurisdictions. But the core case was simple. David had deliberately defrauded me, taking advantage of my medical incapacitation to steal joint assets. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Hospital discharge procedures, final consultations with Michael about travel protocols. Last-minute intelligence from Liam indicating that David had indeed attempted to access frozen accounts overnight and was now in full crisis mode, making frantic calls to financial institutions and legal advisors. The private boat is scheduled for tomorrow evening, Liam reported. Destination unclear, but likely another Caribbean jurisdiction with even stronger privacy protections, possibly Nevis or Antigua. The news confirmed my decision to travel immediately despite medical risks. If David managed to leave Grand Cayman before legal proceedings were completed, recovery could become exponentially more difficult. Jonathan arrived mid-morning with final financial preparations. "I've liquidated a portion of the Neuroval shares, as instructed," he reported, helping me into the wheelchair that hospital policy required for discharge. "The proceeds have been transferred to your new accounts, just over $1 million immediately available. The amount represented roughly a quarter of my hidden assets, enough to fund the legal battle ahead while maintaining substantial reserves." David had stolen approximately $1 million in liquid assets. Poetic justice that I would deploy the same amount to destroy his escape plans. "Any market impact from the sale?" I asked, mindful of protecting the remaining position. Jonathan shook his head. "Minimal. We structured it as a series of smaller transactions to avoid attracting attention. The company continues to perform exceptionally well. The remaining shares have actually increased in value by 3% just this week." One small blessing in the midst of chaos. The Neuroval investment, my father's final gift, continued to grow, ensuring my financial security regardless of how much the legal battle ultimately cost. Margot joined us in the hospital parking area, where a specialized medical transport waited to take me to a private airfield. Michael had arranged for a medical evacuation service that typically handled international patient transfers, repurposed for our unique requirements. "Everything's set in Grand Cayman," Margot confirmed as attendants carefully transferred me from the wheelchair to the specially equipped transport vehicle. "Sophia's team has secured accommodations at a property near the financial district. Private, secure, and with necessary medical facilities." The journey ahead would be challenging, physically painful, and logistically complex. But as the transport pulled away from the hospital, I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. 8 days after waking from surgery to discover David's betrayal, I was no longer the vulnerable victim he had intended to leave behind. I was now the hunter, and he was about to become the hunted. The medical transport wound through Manhattan traffic toward the private airfield in New Jersey, where a specially equipped jet waited. Michael rode beside me, monitoring vital signs and adjusting my position to minimize pain from the vehicle's movement. "Last chance to reconsider," he noted, checking the specialized back brace designed for travel. "This is still medically inadvisable." "Noted," I replied, wincing as we hit a pothole. "Proceed anyway." Margot traveled in a separate vehicle ahead of us, coordinating final logistics with Sophia's team and Liam in Grand Cayman. According to the latest update, David had become increasingly erratic, making failed attempts to access multiple frozen accounts and engaging in heated arguments with both Cassandra Winters and Jeffrey Reed. "He's running out of options," Margot reported via phone. "The boat departure has been moved up to early tomorrow morning instead of evening. They're trying to leave before the financial authority hearing." The timing would be tight. Our flight would arrive late tonight, giving me just hours to recover from the journey before facing the crucial hearing, and, potentially, David himself. As Manhattan's skyline receded behind us, I found myself thinking about the woman I had been just weeks ago, trusting, perhaps naive, believing in the partnership my marriage represented. That woman was gone, transformed by betrayal and pain into someone harder, more clear-eyed about human nature. David had initiated this transformation, thinking it would leave me broken. Instead, it had forged something stronger, someone who would never be vulnerable in the same way again. The medical transport continued toward the airfield, carrying me toward a confrontation 6 years in the making, though I hadn't known it until 8 days ago. David had planned his betrayal meticulously, counting on my vulnerability to ensure his escape. He was about to discover the cost of that miscalculation. The Cayman Islands air felt thick with humidity as I was carefully transferred from the private medical jet to the waiting transport vehicle. Despite Michael's meticulous planning and specialized equipment, the 8-hour flight had left me in significant pain, my surgical site throbbing in protest of the journey. "Take this," Michael instructed, offering a precisely calibrated dose of pain medication. Enough to manage the pain without clouding your thinking. You'll need both clarity and endurance tomorrow. The digital clock on the transport dashboard read 1:47 a.m. In less than 6 hours, Sophia's team would be gathering for final preparations before the 9 a.m. hearing at the Cayman Financial Services Authority. According to Liam's last update, David's private boat was scheduled to depart at 5 a.m., an attempt to flee before legal proceedings could fully constrain him. "We need to block the boat departure," I instructed Margot as our transport wound through darkened streets toward our secured accommodations. "Liam has the details?" "Already handling it," she confirmed. Sophia arranged for port authorities to conduct an unscheduled inspection of all vessels departing before 8 a.m. They'll find enough minor violations to delay any departure. The property Sophia had arranged was a private villa converted for our operations, a combination of legal headquarters, medical recovery space, and security command center. As I was carefully settled into the specially prepared bedroom, Sophia herself greeted me, looking impeccable despite the late hour. "Everything's in place," she reported, pulling up documents on her tablet. "The hearing is fully prepared. Port. Authority cooperating. Local counsel ready." "But Elena," she added, studying my pained expression with professional concern, "are you certain you want to attend in person? Your testimony could be submitted via—" "I'll be there," I interrupted, adjusting position carefully against the pillows. "Just make sure I can see his face when he realizes what's happening." Sophia nodded, recognizing the determination behind my words. "Get some rest then. Car arrives at 8:15 sharp." Sleep proved elusive despite exhaustion. I dozed fitfully, waking frequently as pain medication wore off and tropical rain pelted against the windows. Before dawn, I was already awake, reviewing final case documents while Michael monitored my condition with professional concern. "Your blood pressure is elevated," he noted, frowning at the portable monitor. "Expected given the circumstances, but not ideal. Will it prevent me from attending the hearing?" "No, but—" "Then it's irrelevant," I interrupted, returning to the documents. "What's the status on David's boat?" Margot entered with that update moments later, looking triumphant despite her evident fatigue. Port Authority found critical safety violations requiring immediate attention. No departures permitted until inspections are complete. Estimated time of completion, uncertain but not today. She handed me her phone, showing surveillance photos of David at the marina at 4:30 a.m., gesturing angrily at port officials while Cassandra Winters stood by, looking increasingly concerned. "He knows something's wrong," Margot observed, "but he doesn't yet know what or who is behind it." By 7 a.m., the villa had transformed into a command center. Sophia's legal team arrived, with final preparations. Medical equipment was discreetly packed for transport to the hearing venue. Security personnel reviewed protocols for every contingency. At precisely 8:15, I was carefully transferred to the waiting vehicle, a subtle but armored SUV with specialized seating installed for my condition. Michael accompanied me, medical bag at the ready, his expression making clear his continued disapproval of this entire venture. The Cayman Financial Services Authority building stood gleaming in the morning sunshine, its modern glass facade reflecting the ironically named Elgin Avenue, a street lined with discreet offices housing trillions in global assets seeking shelter from taxation and scrutiny. "David arrived 5 minutes ago," Liam reported, meeting our vehicle at the private entrance. "Reed is with him. They're currently in consultation room C, 3rd floor, visibly agitated." "And Cassandra Winters?" I asked, allowing Michael and the security team to assist me from the vehicle to a waiting wheelchair. The back brace concealed beneath my tailored suit jacket kept me upright, though each movement sent fresh waves of pain through my surgical site. "Departed this morning," Liam replied with a slight smile. "Apparently decided Mr. Sullivan's situation had become too complicated for her professional services. Rats deserting a sinking ship. Appropriate." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of final preparations. Sophia's team reviewed strategy one last time. Michael adjusted medication and support equipment. Security positioned themselves discreetly throughout the building. At 8:57, we took our positions in the hearing room, a formal space dominated by a horseshoe-shaped table where the 5 members of the Financial Authority's Special Review Committee would sit. Sophia and her local counsel arranged themselves at one side table, leaving the opposite position conspicuously empty, awaiting David and his legal representation. At precisely 9 a.m., the side door opened, and David entered with Jeffrey Reed. His confident stride faltered momentarily upon seeing the assembled group, then froze completely when his eyes met mine. The shock that passed across his face was everything I had traveled 1,100 miles to witness. Disbelief, confusion, dawning horror. Each emotion flashed across features I had once loved, now revealing the stranger beneath. Elena? My name emerged as a strangled question. "Hello, David," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions coursing through me. "Surprised to see me?" Before he could respond, the main doors opened as the review committee entered. The formal proceedings began immediately. The chairwoman, a distinguished Caymanian lawyer named Mrs. Phillips, calling the emergency session to order. "We are convened to review petition number CAY 2023-178E regarding the disputed assets currently held in various financial institutions under the name David Sullivan and related entities," she announced. Given the serious allegations of fraud and the supporting documentation provided by U.S. authorities, this committee has authorized today's emergency review. David leaned toward Reed, whispering urgently. Reed's expression remained professionally blank, though the tension in his shoulders revealed his awareness of their deteriorating position. What followed was a methodical dismantling of David's financial escape plan. Sophia presented evidence chronologically, beginning with the forged IRA withdrawal signature and progressing through the documented timeline of David's exit strategy, the damning spreadsheet recovered from his supposedly wiped laptop. Throughout the presentation, David's composure crumbled visibly. The confident man who had entered the room transformed into someone hunted, cornered, desperate. He whispered increasingly frantic instructions to Reed, who could only shake his head in response, limited by professional ethics from participating in ongoing fraud. When the committee called a brief recess to consider initial evidence, David finally approached me directly, Reed attempting unsuccessfully to restrain him. "How?" he demanded, eyes wild with confusion and anger. "You were supposed to be..." "Helpless," I supplied. "Broken. Too sedated and devastated to function?" His expression confirmed my interpretation. That had been exactly his calculation. "You forgot who I am, David," I continued, meeting his gaze. Steadily. "You forgot who my father was, what he taught me. You thought you knew everything about our finances, but you missed something critical." Recognition dawned slowly. "The biotech investment," he breathed. "Your father's special project that you never discussed. Neuroval Therapeutics," I confirmed, currently valued at approximately $4.2 million, more than enough to fund this operation. His face contorted with a complex mixture of emotions, rage, humiliation, and beneath it all, a calculating assessment of potential escape routes that had been his true nature all along. "We can reach an arrangement," he suggested, voice lowered. "A settlement. Split the assets, go our separate ways. No criminal charges, no public embarrassment." I studied him for a moment, this stranger I had lived with for 6 years, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. The handsome features that had once made my heart race now seemed like a mask, concealing something hollow and grasping beneath. "The time for arrangements passed the moment you decided to empty our accounts while I was unconscious on an operating table," I replied calmly. There will be no settlement, David. Only consequences. The committee reconvened minutes later, announcing their preliminary decision. All assets in question would remain frozen pending full investigation, with recommended referral to criminal authorities for prosecution of underlying fraud. David's remaining access to Cayman financial institutions was immediately suspended. As the formal language of financial destruction continued, David sat motionless, the full magnitude of his situation finally registering. Everything he had planned, the carefully constructed exit, the meticulously hidden funds, the new life he had envisioned, collapsing around him. When the committee concluded, security personnel approached discreetly. "Mr. Sullivan, your presence is requested by local authorities regarding potential violations of banking regulations." David's eyes darted around the room, seeking escape routes that no longer existed. "This isn't over," he hissed in my direction, as security escorted him toward the door. "Actually, it is," I replied, watching him go. "It ended the moment you underestimated me." The aftermath unfolded with surprising swiftness. David was detained by Cayman authorities for questioning regarding multiple financial violations, then transferred to U.S. custody based on the fraud warrants Detective Kang had secured. His carefully hidden assets were systematically uncovered and frozen, the legal mechanisms he had attempted to establish invalidated by evidence of underlying fraud. 3 days after the hearing, I stood on the balcony of the villa, watching the Caribbean sunset while Michael monitored my vital signs with his usual clinical precision. "Blood pressure improving," he noted approvingly. "Though you're still pushing too hard physically." "Worth it," I replied, gazing out at the horizon where azure waters met darkening sky. Margot joined us, handing me a secure tablet displaying news headlines from New York financial media. "David's arrest is public now. Associates are distancing themselves. Former clients coming forward with other financial irregularities. The man I had married was systematically being erased, his professional reputation destroyed, his financial schemes exposed, his freedom suspended pending multiple criminal charges. The empire of deception he had built was crumbling, brick by fraudulent brick." "What now?" Margot asked, settling into a chair beside me. "Back to New York for continued recovery?" I considered the question, watching the last sliver of sun disappear, below the horizon. The past 2 weeks had been defined by a singular purpose: bringing David to justice. With that goal substantially accomplished, what remained? "I'm not going back," I decided, the words feeling right as they formed. "Not to New York, not to our old life. There's nothing there for me now." "Then where?" Michael asked, packing away his medical equipment. I gestured toward the coastline stretching beyond our villa. "Here, for now. The Neuroval shares provide freedom to recover properly, without rushing back to former obligations. After that..." I shrugged slightly, careful of my healing spine. Something new. Something entirely mine. The path ahead remained uncertain, the physical recovery challenging, the emotional landscape forever altered by betrayal. But as darkness settled over the Caribbean and distant lights began to twinkle along the shore, I felt something unexpected take root alongside the hard-won justice, possibility. David had intended my surgery to be an ending, a moment of ultimate vulnerability he could exploit to destroy the life we had built. Instead, it had become a beginning, painful and unplanned, but a beginning nonetheless. I reached for the glass of sparkling water on the table beside me, raising it slightly in a private toast. To my father, whose financial wisdom had saved me. To the surgeon who had repaired my spine while my husband tried to shatter my future. To Margot, Jonathan, Sophia, Michael, and everyone who had helped transform vulnerability into strength. And perhaps, most importantly, to the woman I had become in the crucible of betrayal. Someone stronger, clearer-eyed, and finally, truly free. To new beginnings, I murmured as stars appeared in the darkening sky. on my own terms. Tomorrow would bring continued legal proceedings, ongoing recovery challenges, and decisions about the future. But tonight, watching waves gently break on distant shores, I allowed myself to simply exist in the moment of victory. David had taken what he thought was everything, but he had forgotten the most important asset of all, the resilient woman beneath, the trusting wife he thought he knew. That woman had not only survived his betrayal, she had transcended it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen.